Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your Sun in Aries and Sagittarius rising. So we're talking about double fire, and with Aries, we're talking about a cardinal sign, and Sag is a mutable sign. So I think that's a good combination because, people who have a lot of cardinal energy tend to be very well, they could be bossy a lot of times, but this is a balance because the immutable signs are more cooperative and the cardinal signs are take charge. And so the flexibility plus the initiative can lead to, being versatile and still going after what you want in a very direct kind of way. Obviously, you have other placements that could tip the balance in one direction or another. And that's why it's important to look at your moon sign for emotional nature issues, because with Aries in particular, it can indicate somebody who's a bit of a hothead. And even with the sun sign, forgetting about the moon being the emotional nature. And Mars, which is the ruler of Aries, is a personal planet, and that can indicate the way that the person expresses anger as a particular emotion. And depending on what that sign is, that could also be very important to see what is going on, because when someone has the sun in Aries, they may very well have Mars in Aries. Not all the time, but since it's a personal planet, they could. The moon can be any sign. The rising sign can be any sign. So when we're talking about double fire with the sun and rising, we're talking about two signs that, in theory, trine each other. This is not going to be true for all of you. You're going to have to check. I use astro.com because they provide an easy to read aspects table, but whatever chart generator you use, if they have an aspects table, they will give that to you and you don't have to memorize anything. And by the way, there are different schools of thought on what the appropriate orbs are, or distances between two planets for different aspects, so that it gets kind of confusing sometimes, and I just prefer to leave it to the people who do this kind of stuff. And so if you have like an early degree of Sun in Aries and a late degree of Sag rising, they will not form a trine, but just the fact that they're both in fire means that they are compatible and therefore consistent. And that can be helpful because your rising sign can be kind of this way you present yourself, the way that you behave around other people. And if that is radically different from the person's sun sign, they can find that they are misunderstood on a regular basis. I'll give you an example. I have the sun in Sagittarius and I have Taurus rising, and they're close enough to be in conjunction, which is 150 degrees apart, and is like really considered a weird, awkward type of angle that is so different that there isn't anything to really find common ground with. I have, with some of the videos that I have done, I have found common ground with signs that form in conjunctions, but it is very difficult with Taurus and Sagittarius. And I definitely have found in my life that it has been a little bit difficult to kind of have that, calling card that the rising sign represents and have it be consistent with who I came here to be. So I think that that is something really good when you have this combination of Aries and Sagittarius, is that you're going to have consistency because they're both fire signs, and just by that, by virtue of that, they're both going to have certain things in common. Both of these signs are adventurous. They are very blunt. So there's like kind of this immediacy with Aries. It's the first sign of the zodiac, so it's like what you see is what you get. There's not a facade. Well, actually the facade would be the rising sign. And with Sagittarius, it's not going to be like that because Sagittarius value honesty. And so they don't want to put up a false front. And so you're going to act in a way that is very straightforward. With that sun in Aries, it could be downright blunt to the point where other people take offense. And I don't know about you, but I have certainly experienced this as I've gotten older, because I have Mercury in Sagittarius too. I've had to really kind of realize that even if something is true, you still have to be diplomatic. And sometimes people, they're very uncomfortable with the unvarnished truth, with people that don't beat around the bush. And to me, that's not really my problem if other people like folks who are very indirect in their statements. I don't really feel it's my responsibility to kind of like hem and haw. That's not something I would ever do. But just in other respects, like being able to be compassionate and realize that other people may be sensitive to certain things, because sometimes I hear people saying stuff or writing stuff online where they say, I'm just telling the truth about this or that. And, truth should never be a weapon. So there's not, malice that's really associated with the way that you may communicate to others, or just in the way that you act with them. But I think part of it also is because fire signs are very self-possessed, which means that we tend to have this sense of self that other people don't necessarily have. Part of that you can look at as the desire to be an individual, the desire to be independent. Not everybody has that desire. Some people really like to have the safety in numbers, where they enlist a lot of people to think the same way, do the same thing. Fire signs are rebellious, so we actually have a tendency to like being maybe the only one that's doing something, so we can stand out in a crowd. So this combination can certainly be rebellious. If you did have any kind of strict parenting growing up, this would not have gone over well with you. However, on the flip side, which is really good, it may not have impacted you as strongly in terms of, breaking you down. What I mean by that is, if somebody, let's say someone was raised where, this is the most horrible stuff, is being physically abused, but even psychological abuse, emotional abuse, whatever you want to call it. An Aries person is going to be naturally very resilient, because Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is the god of war. So there's courage built into the sign of Aries. There's also a combative tendency with the sign of Aries, where the person naturally looks at life as one big battle or a series of battles. So it isn't unusual for Aries people to view life as this necessary battle that they are engaged in. And if by chance everything is going perfectly in an Aries person's life, they may even start their own fights because they're bored or they feel uncomfortable that they're not waging war on something, or that they don't have to defend themselves against something. Sagittarius is more about this idea of the person who sees the bigger picture in life, is philosophical. And that can, so, and going back to that example, if somebody comes from a background of trauma, the Sagittarian can put it in a larger perspective, and they can lean on their spiritual faith to see them through. And so it's kind of like this combination can be the person who has like a very positive outlook on life, and that really serves them because they're not going to just believe that everything is bad because of what their current circumstance is. They can say, well, things can get better, or if it already has happened, they can really actively seek growth experiences. So, I think about that book called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale as an example of that's kind of like an old-timey type of book on positive motivation or positive thinking. But the point is that these kinds of resources exist, and some people would never even think to use them. But this combination definitely would. So you do tend to see the glass half full. And as an Aries person with cardinal modality, you can be somebody who is take charge, or as I call it, can do, or, a self-starter. So if you don't like something in your life, you will do something about that. Aries can be an impulsive sign. I think all the fire signs are capable of that as well. But Aries especially, because Aries being ruled by Mars, there's always that sense of urgency. There's always that sense of impatience with Aries. And so you have to be careful with that because you have a double fire, so it can make you doubly rash and therefore kind of impatient to have something happen, for instance. And as a result, you might choose to take action, but it might be premature action. And then you repent in leisure. So that's one of the pitfalls. But on the positive side, this is these two signs being fire signs, you can be somebody who is always forward thinking, like not caught up in the past. I will give a caveat though, because if your moon is in Cancer, for instance, or Cancer ruling the past, you might be stuck in the past emotionally, and that could affect things. Maybe you have the sun or a personal planet in the 4th house or even the 12th house. The 12th house can be past lives, so that talk about the past. But in the 4th house, Mercury in the 4th house, the moon in the 4th house, so memories, emotions stuck in the past. So that could be a little bit different. But in general, you're going to be forward moving, enthusiastic about life, maybe writing in sentences with a bunch of exclamation points, lover of freedom, no doubt about it. I think of the Knight of Wands in the tarot, because the Knight of Wands is supposed to be Sag, and I always think of Aries when I think of the Knight of Wands. Because Sagittarius is your ruler, it means that the ruler of Sag is your ruler. So that means that your ruler of your chart is Jupiter. That's the planet of luck and expansion. So that can give you a lucky touch to life where you find that you are aligned a lot of the time because, you happen to go to a certain place and it turns out to be the right place at the right time. You can also look at your sun's ruler as your ruler as well. And that ruler is Mars. So you have Mars and Jupiter. And because of this, Mars is also, there's a physicality about Mars. So you may be always on the go. With Jupiter as your ruler on the ascendant, this may even be traveling, like you may have wanderlust and you may love to go to foreign countries in particular. This is a great combination for somebody who is an adventurer. And if so, you may find that everything that ties you down, whether it is your job or whether it is a serious relationship, it's not going to work if you feel like you have to be rooted in one place. Now, there are situations where it may not be that way, where you're much more, I was going to say grounded, but that's not, I mean tethered. So if your son's, I mentioned like if your son is in the 4th house, I was mentioning these examples like that, but I wasn't thinking about actually having Sag as the ruler. Actually, come to think of it, you could have the sun in the, you could have the sun in the 4th house, come to think of it. We would say that Pisces is your 4th house cusp, but because of the unequal house system, you could, if you have an early degree of your sun, it might be in that 4th house. You never know. It might work out that way. So that's a possibility. And then you may be more of a homebody and you may want to be into that kind of thing. But yeah, there could be some kind of situation where you might marry late, or when I say marry, it doesn't have to be legally, but I mean have your significant other at a later age, if at all, because you just may even be in the type of job where you are in a far off place where it's not easy to get involved with somebody else, and perhaps you just kind of shy away from that because Aries as a sign in particular is very ambitious. All fire signs are considered ambitious through the fire element, but it's really about expansion. So I don't feel that, Sag is the last fire sign, so it really has that kind of an old age vibe to it, and I feel like it can be much more kind of contemplative, and because it's philosophical, it can see the bigger picture, but the bigger picture of life itself, because it's pondering the meaning of life. And so the person may say, well, a person's career isn't the ultimate in life. It's really about their intentions, that what they're doing to go through this world. I think, like, if you talk about Sagittarius rising in terms of appearance, because the rising sign can influence the appearance, women with this placement may be tomboy tomboyish. And by the way, because as a kid, I was a tomboy and I had a feminine sign, having Taurus rising, but my sun was in Sag, and I think that definitely influenced it. Being a tomboy does not mean that the person is, actually trying to look masculine. It's a very important distinction. I was just thinking about when I was young, like in kindergarten. I remember because it was like at the beginning of the 70s, and there was this hairstyle that was where women had very, very short cropped hair. Um, and I had that hairstyle. My mother had formerly been a hairdresser, and so she put that hairstyle on me, and I used to have long hair, but I got bubble gum caught in it, so she cut my hair like really short. And I remember like kids asking me, "Are you a boy or a girl?" Because you know how like when you're young, you can look androgynous. And I remember just getting irritated by it, just saying like I'm a girl. It wasn't anything like feeling offended or anything because I was so young, but just constantly getting asked that question. But being, having some of those tendencies, liking to be to play with boys, you may have that when you're young, because I really believe that the rising sign is influential for the first 30 years until the first Saturn return, maybe in your late 20s, around 30, and that the rising sign really does kind of give a window into the family of origin. So maybe you come from a family that stressed intellectual prowess, maybe you were encouraged to read at a young age. You had a lot of books in your house and educated parents, that kind of thing. And just that, maybe a very progressive environment, a lot of opportunities for coming into contact with people from different cultures and learn, or even traveling with your family. That might have been one of those things that was part of it. But sometimes that can extend to, like I said, like girls that have that kind of tomboyish quality. And it's like when you get older, you're not really going to lose that because Aries is a masculine sign as well, being a fire sign. So that can play out with enjoying doing adventurous things, whether it's hiking or water rafting. Who knows what that involves. Just traveling places and doing things that are kind of off the beaten path, that provides you a lot of stimulation, because Aries can be a daredevil in particular. And in terms of career choices, I think that anything in the field of, I would look more to the sun sign for sure. And Aries is always like a weird one for me to kind of say, okay, what would an Aries person like? Because the ruler is Mars, you could say being in the military, and certainly that would involve travel as well for some people who do that. Maybe a lot of military people, that's part of the job description. But in addition to the military, being a police officer, maybe, because Sagittarius, since your ruler is Jupiter, there's going to be a moralistic core to you where you believe that there's right and wrong. And it's not to say that you would be necessarily dogmatic about it, but certainly Sagittarius can be preachy. So there may be something where you feel like very strongly that we have to uphold, the values in our society and make sure that everybody is, doing what they're supposed to be doing. This is how society works. I do feel that anything that involves entrepreneurship would be great with this combination because you could easily work for yourself, and uh, fire is creative. So, also being a performer, for sure, that could be a possibility with this combination. And that could, sometimes that involves traveling as well. But just having that freedom to not necessarily have to be on that hamster wheel and work a 40-hour-a-week job. By the way, there's nothing wrong with that. And some people love having that routine, having a job where they know exactly what is expected of them. But the Aries type of person, because you are a cardinal sign as well as a fire sign, you are just so desirous of freedom, but also your own, calling the shots. So if you were working for somebody else, you'd probably gravitate towards a position of authority. But also not having predictability, not having the same old, same old. There's, I think, with both of these signs, fire in general, but I think Aries is really true, is this idea of wanting novelty. And this is one of the things you have to watch out for, is the tendency to start things and not finish them. This is typical Aries, because Aries is an initiator, being a cardinal sign, but not necessarily that hot when it comes to sustaining effort, because you get that initial burst. It's like the Ace of Wands in the tarot, where you're just like really raring to go. And then you kind of fizzle out, because once something becomes repetitive, you just are like, okay, I'm on to the next thing. You lose interest, and you can have a bunch of half-finished projects. This will be much more favorable if your Mars is in Taurus, for instance, or even Aquarius, where it's just like a fixed sign. You tend to stay motivated, you stay the course, and you finish what you started. Yeah, so I think education can be an area that, being a coach for sure, because Aries, I think in particular, I would associate with sports, and this idea of motivating people. So a life coach as well. Any type of job where you are like taking that positivity that you naturally possess and giving it to other people. You may not realize it, but so many people don't have that same kind of innate positivity in their nature, and so they tend to be very cynical. They may think that they can't do certain things that they can do, and you can help them to do that. There's so many things that you would be good at, but those are just a few. And in terms of love, I mean, I think that this can be a romantic combination, but be careful about any tendency to kind of be attracted to someone who provides security, who is very like, you feel like that you're a good match with this person because you're very adventurous and they're very sensible. Aries can be attracted to Cancers and Capricorns because they square off to these signs. So there's a physical attraction there, but there may not be a compatibility across the board. And that is something to really like think about, because you don't want to be involved with someone where it devolves into a relationship where you feel like the naughty child who is spending too much money, because this combination can be very free spending when it comes to money. And maybe you don't want to stay at home as much as the other person does. And they're chastising you and they're trying to control you and kind of domesticate you, and you're rebelling from it. So you want to have somebody who appreciates the way that you are and is not trying to change you, and also gives you your freedoms, and that you can give them their freedom. And you both can, have a relationship where, yeah, of course you do things together and you come together, but you also have your own lives, and you don't have to feel like you're this bad person because you want to go out with your own friends one night, that you don't necessarily want to be attached by the hip to that person 24/7. So there are people out there who will grant you that freedom, and you just have to choose wisely. With Aries, it's always about not just being rash, because you're so enthusiastic. You can jump uh, on board some train that's going to a place you don't want to go. And I'm talking about in terms of your excitement about something. You might get on board with something and find out that it's not for you, but some things are easier to let go of than others. So just remember that. Okay, that's what I have for you, and I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.